Micro? Micro?
Welcome to MCC. I just want to mention that we not just have people, the folks that we typically get for these events here in Washington, but we have folks who flew in from Chicago, from the Midwest. We have people that came in from Dakar, not just the team that's presenting. And then we have a team that came in from France as well. So there was a lot of interest in this event. We really appreciate you making the time, traveling, and attending. On the kind of the run of show, we're going to have some opening remarks. I'll introduce our first speakers. We'll then have a presentation, a few words by our country director, and then a presentation by the government of Senegal on their proposed projects for our Compact program. We'll break for coffee, and I think, even though we're government, I think we're gonna get there with coffee, all right? I know there wasn't any there, but I'm really hopeful that we're gonna have coffee and a coffee break, and it's not just a break, okay? I think it's gonna be an actual coffee break. Then we'll come back, and we wanna hear from you after that. So in the packets are some questions about the program. Think beyond those as well, but those are just to get you thinking as you're looking through that presentation and hearing about this program. What can I bring to the government of Senegal and MCC as my feedback of the private sector, of how I can engage in this program, how I can help them realize their goals, how I can increase my investment in Senegal. We'll do that for about an hour. And then I know a few of you have signed up for one-on-ones, B2G meetings that start around 1:30. There are a couple slots left if you want to see me during the, hopefully, coffee break. And then we can slot you in on those. They're just, again, I think 3 available. Those will start at 1:30. And if you're signed up for one of those, just find me or be in this area. We have to go outside of this kind of holding area to a couple of conference rooms, kind of the super secret part of MCC. And I'll make sure that you can get back there and you get all your security clearances, right? We've had some issues with those recently in this government. So a few housekeeping things. Bathrooms, the men's room is on this side, just go out and take a left. The women's room, this side, and take a right. There's a set of stairs. If we really start cooking, and I don't mean like good discussion, but we're getting hot in here, then we take that exit down there and we leave the building, okay? So I think we're about ready to get started, but I do want to express my appreciation to our public affairs team, Laura and Lindsay sitting in the back. Also Brandon with IT, though I may want to thank him after the presentation rather than before, and we'll make sure that this works. And also Matt Jacob, who's a member of MCC, our program officer on Senegal. It was really their work over the past couple of months that brought this all together. And this morning, even yesterday afternoon, it was one of those times when you're like, what do we need to do? We didn't need to do anything because they had covered all the bases for us. So finally, there are going to be, remarks and presentations in French and English. So we do have interpretation services. You'll see the headsets, English for 1, French for 2. And if you can leave those under your seat at the end of the session, and that's probably the feedback session. Lindsay is showing you the wireless, which is Grapevine. And the password this month, Clearwater, is that right? Okay, great. So why don't we dive in? I'd like to introduce our acting CEO, Mr. Jonathan Nash. Jonathan has been here almost since the beginning of MCC, so about 12 years or so. He is our acting CEO. He was previously our acting principal deputy vice president for Compact Operations, as well as deputy vice president for operations, where he covered infrastructure, environment, which you'll hear more about from him, or from me about him, and then private sector. So he was my manager directly. So I know he's very supportive of engaging the private sector in the compact development process, and made some time for us today. So with MCC, he's worked over 40 countries in those 12 years. Prior, he was with the Government Accountability Office, doing environmental audits, both internationally and domestic. He comes by that honestly. He started international development as a Peace Corps volunteer in Honduras. I think there are a lot of us in this room or in this milieu who started off in Peace Corps. And he has degrees in environmental resource management and policy from Indiana as an undergrad or master's. Master's at Indiana, undergrad in Michigan, so he gets to root for a good basketball and a good football team. And the final thing is I will say is while I also went to I think is a good public university, what I think really, distinguishes Jonathan is that I would never be able to say that I was summa cum laude. I had a very different collegiate experience than I think Jonathan had. So Jonathan, please.
Thanks, Jason. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to MCC. It's great to have you here today. We're looking forward to a very productive discussion around our potential Senegal Compact. We're grateful to have a strong delegation from the government of Senegal. Jason mentioned that a little bit earlier. We're also pleased to have with us in a co-hosting role a man who needs very little introduction, Dr. Mima Nedeljkovic, President and CEO of the Initiative for Global Development, and also co-chair of MCC's Private Sector Advisory Council. I also want to thank and acknowledge Mariam Decrène, the National Coordinator for the Senegal Compact Development Team, and David Weld, our MCC Senegal Country Team Lead, and their teams for all the hard work that has brought us here today. And also special thank you to you, Jason, and Matt Jacob for putting together today's events. So I'm glad to see such a great audience here today. We're always looking for ways to engage and dialogue with the private sector, particularly during the compact development phase, so that we can make sure that our investments are responsive to your needs. As many of you know, MCC is an innovative foreign assistance agency with a single focus, a single mandate, and that's to reduce poverty through private sector-led economic growth. We work with a select group of countries that are committed to investing in their people, promoting economic freedoms, and are committed to good governance. So in working with these countries, catalyzing private investment to spur the private sector-led economic growth we want to see has been fundamental to our work since MCC's founding in 2004. Innovative approaches from viability gap financing for infrastructure to support for tough regulatory reforms helps unlock capital, improves the investment environment, helps create opportunities for firms in our partner countries. Just a few weeks ago, I was in Addis Ababa for the Africa Business and Investment Forum, co-hosted by the Corporate Council in Africa and also the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. The forum brought together African heads of state, senior U.S. government officials, and representatives of multilateral institutions, civil society, and of course the private sector. President Sall was at this forum as well and talked about the importance of investments in the energy sector. The conversations we had at this investment forum underscored that blended finance, which is, as many of you know, the merging of public and private funds to mobilize additional private capital flows for the public good, is vital to tackling our toughest global development challenges. At MCC, we are continuing to forge strong, innovative partnerships with the private sector and civil society, foundations, and others to increase the impact of our collective investments. And we're committed to supporting our partner countries as they work to create the right conditions for private investment, such as in Senegal. As many of you know, MCC's board of directors selected Senegal as eligible to develop a compact in December 2015. Our joint economic analysis with the government of Senegal identified the high cost and limited access to electricity as significant factors hindering growth and investment in the country. In partnership with the government's compact development team, we have developed some proposed projects, which we'll discuss in detail today. These projects are designed to address those constraints that we identified and increase overall economic growth and investment in Senegal. So today's event is really about getting your feedback on these projects. We're also interested in hearing about any factors that you are looking at when considering investments in Senegal and how the proposed compact can help facilitate your investments in Senegal. So we're very excited and honored to partner with the government of Senegal on this second compact and to build on the achievements of MCC's first compact with the government of Senegal, which focused on agricultural productivity and access to markets. So MCC understands the importance of a robust, strong power sector. To date, we've invested over $1.5 billion in energy projects in our partner countries, and our portfolio continues to grow, particularly in West Africa. I'll give you a couple of examples. In Ghana, we are supporting the government's efforts to improve the financial and operational health of the utility by bringing in a competitively selected private sector operator. This operator will also invest up to $500 million to strengthen the distribution network to reduce losses and improve service quality for businesses and households. So combined with our investment of about $500 million and the private sector operator's investment of $500 million, we're looking at $1 billion of additional investment in the energy sector, which we believe will catalyze additional private sector investment, particularly in energy generation. In Benin, MCC's investments are crowding in commercial finance, including the soon-to-be-launched off-grid clean energy facility, a competitive grants program, which will join private sector funds with our funds to support critical public infrastructure, household solar systems, mini-grids, and energy efficiency measures. We're launching a call for partnerships and projects later this month, so stay tuned. In Liberia, we've worked alongside other donors to fund the rehabilitation of the Mount Coffee hydropower plant and are currently working to strengthen the operational health of the main utility, LEC. And in Burkina Faso, we are also currently developing a new compact that is likely to focus on strengthening the power sector. So all these programs in the power sector are in response to what our analysis shows and what many of you know firsthand, and that is lack of access to reliable energy is a key constraint to economic growth. So in conclusion, we believe that there is great potential for the private sector to contribute expertise and capital alongside of us to bring about the transformational change we want to see in our partner countries, and in particular, Senegal. We're grateful for your participation in today's event. We're looking forward to having open, honest dialogue about opportunities and challenges, and we want to make sure that we incorporate your feedback as we work to finalize this proposed compact program. So after this event, you can keep up with procurement and partnership opportunities by visiting the Work With Us page on our website, mcc.gov. So I wish all the best for today's discussions and look forward to hearing about the productive discussions. Thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Jonathan mentioned we have a second speaker, a good friend of mine, Mima Nedeljkovic, who's the president and CEO of the Initiative for Global Development. And I've known both Mima and the Initiative for Global Development for a good 10, 12 years, and I'm glad to see them coming together and you leading that fine organization, Mima. Previously, and when we first met, Mima was the chairman of Schaefer International, and so has worked in the private sector, particularly around agribusiness, throughout Africa, specifically West Africa. I think we were talking around Mali at the time, and the sugar plant in Mali. You've also worked, as your own independent consultancy in project finance, PPPs, trade and investment throughout Africa. So it brings a deep, rich private sector experience. But Mima also brings a public sector side and understands how these programs can come together. Under the first Bush administration, he was the executive director for the U.S. government to the African Development Bank in Abidjan, and also served in roles with the Peace Corps, with USAID, and with USTDA. So I really like that we've got someone, in that role at IGD that understands not just the importance of the private sector, but how the public sector can catalyze that investment. Importantly, he also serves on our advisory council for MCC, which is a council that meets a couple times a year and gives us feedback on the programs that we're developing, just like you today are giving the Senegalese your direct feedback. So we appreciate you taking on that role, Mima. You're a very busy man. Finally, a little bit, Mima's a smart guy, went to Yale undergrad, again got a master's degree as well from GW in international relations, a lot of political science and international relations that helps in both that public and private sector role. And then he's Dr. Mima Nedeljkovic, okay? So just remember that. He has a PhD from Florida State, but also studied at Mohammed Sank in Rabat in Morocco. And I see Mima a lot when we're just kind of passing and talking at an event like this, but the last time you and I actually sat down and had a good conversation and had a drink was in the Tour Hassan in Morocco, probably about a year and a half ago. And I remember that very well because during that conversation, Mima had just come into this role on our advisory council and wanted to know, what are you doing to go out and talk to the U.S. private sector? What are you actually doing? And I told him what we were doing. And now we have you a part of that. I know you've made that, a priority at IGD, and you made it a priority for us too through that role. So, Mima Nedeljkovic, thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Jason, for that intro. Jonathan, MCC, nos collègues du Sénégal. Je vais parler en anglais quand même, so you can leave your earphones off for the Anglophones. I'll stay in English. Real pleasure to be here. Thank you for the intros. I'm glad we have many people from different parts of the world because it's all about really getting private sector input into our deliberations. I was luckily myself able to arrive here from Denver last night, so glad we're all here early morning. I look forward to that coffee break. For those of you who don't know IGD very quickly, we are a network of industrial chef d'entreprise, sorry, I'm going back and forth the languages, business leaders worldwide. We're really focused particularly on the African business voice. So out of our Frontier 100 leaders, which is the name, more than 100 people around the world, more than half are African business leaders. And one of the things I think is very important with the MCC outreach and part of the discussion here this morning is to get the input both of the American colleagues as well as our African colleagues on doing business on the continent. Today's event certainly comes, I think, at a very important time. You know, the recognition that public funding is really not an endless game. The pockets are coming drier. It's something we at the MCC Advisory Council focus a lot on. That's the leveraging of private capital into the projects, into MCC projects, into MCC countries that are investment ready. The blend of finance that Jonathan mentioned about that I think MTC's taken a big, strong lead on is a very, very critical area. Today's country, Power in Senegal, and of course all the other power projects in the region are very key, very important. I mean, Senegal is a shining example of a country that has achieved that accelerated growth. I think if we're looking at, if my research team is correct, that we're at 6.5% growth over the past 2 years. That's really quite an amazing feat, I think, particularly in the slump period that many of the African countries have gotten in this past few years with the low commodity prices. So we're gathered here today both as American business, African business, French business. You know what? I always say to people, business is business. In the end, businesses do business with businesses. Where they come from is something we don't often think about. We think about what's the best combination for the best result. And from IGD perspective, we're always looking at what is the best combination of investments we can bring to Africa, to our countries, to our various members on the continent. This event, I think, is particularly important because a decade ago, 10, 15 years ago, Jason mentioned Schaefer. I mean, Schaefer did a lot of business all over African sugar and rice industry. But by and large, we did not have yet that mature African business sector. We didn't have the partners most of the business we did was really with governments and privatizations. What has happened in the last 10, 15 years is that we've seen a very strong maturation and growth of the African company, African born and bred businesses, the African SMEs. So the pitch as I go around, whether it's here at Denver, wherever, is the importance of being able to link up American business with African business. And in MCC compact countries is a particularly strong area where that kind of leverage can be achieved. I don't need to tell you that African companies are the drivers of growth in the continent. So the real key is how do we, as business partners, add on into that growth? And that is what it's all about. This is what we've really pushed big time with the MCC Advisory Council. That's why I think this morning it's important as we have the discussion that we capture the inputs from American colleagues, French colleagues, African colleagues, no matter who. What is the best way that we really can get private capital leveraged in, blended into the sort of public funding that MCC is putting out? That is the key. They really, I call it the simple expression people have heard, salami financing. There's so much in the salami that the public sector must finance before it's interesting enough for the private sector to take over. So what's that bite before we can really come in with that big chunk of commercial funding? That's really what it's all about, blended finance. One final thing on IGD, we're, in terms of what we're trying to do, we work very closely with MCC on these outreach, both on the continent with our forums, as well as fora that we do in the U.S., where we're calling the first U.S. Roadshow that we're putting on in April, It's anchored off of the spring meetings of the World Bank. But the idea is business is not in Washington. This is a great talk policy here. American business is in the interior. So we're going then on a road show 2 days to New York to meet really finance, insurance, equity funds, again, with our Frontier 100 leaders as part of it. In collaboration, I think, with MCC in a couple of stops. We go to Des Moines for agri-industry, big area support, and then finally to Houston for 2 days, where we'll focus on power, energy infrastructure. Certainly be very happy to have the team from Senegal coming in, where we'll have a good combination of private sector and business leaders, as well as MCC. I think USAID is also participating with us with the trade hubs and a number of other U.S. agencies. So with that, we look forward to a very fruitful, productive event today. I think the key is to get inputs from the business folks here. And as we look at the power of Senegal, it's very simple, and there's a reason. I think that virtually all the compacts, the last few in Africa, have been power-related, because it's all about value addition. Growth cannot happen without value addition of whatever we're producing, be it ag product, be it other product, be it minerals. Doesn't matter. You got to have the power. No power, no growth. No growth, no jobs. So it's very simple. There's only one simple major constraint: affordable power. With that, we can then have the growth. So for that, we really look forward to a very exciting and fruitful discussion this morning. Thank you very much for the invitation. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mima. I'd like to pivot now to our country team and kind of the meat of this presentation. And I'm going to introduce David Weld, who is our country team leader, country director for Senegal. So David manages not just all of the MCC team that's working on this compact, he is the primary point of contact for the government of Senegal and is responsible for delivering this compact with MCC and the government of Senegal. David also has been here for a while. Most previously, he structured and led the development of the Côte d'Ivoire Compact and has done the same thing with Benin and Burkina Faso. He did take a hiatus for a while, went to OPIC, so got some of that private sector experience, albeit within government, so it's been a very strong supporter of events like this as well. Previously, David worked in Nigeria and DRC building low-income housing. He was a presidential management fellow, so he had his pick of U.S. government. We're really glad that he stayed, here and picked MCC. Went to Middlebury undergrad. Both Princeton and University of Cape Town, 2 different master's degrees. And I'm kind of with you, right? You can't choose between those two. You got to do them both. And that's fair. That's fair. The thing that I would say about David is, if we have any tennis players in the room? Any tennis players in the room? Okay. When you're playing David, he's kind of like me. He's a southpaw. He's left-handed. And so that first ball that comes from him, the spin, you'll miss it completely. And I can tell you from experience, that spin on the left hand, all that I've been doing to other people for years, he did it to me. And it takes a little while, but it was a lot of fun. So I'd like to have David come up, give us a little bit about the compact development process, and then ask him to introduce the Government of Senegal team that will then present the program, and then we'll go into our, hopefully, coffee break. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Jason. You did beat me, I recall, in that tennis match. So I'll have to work on my forehand a little bit more. But good morning, everybody, and thank you again for coming. You're about to see an outstanding presentation by my Senegalese colleagues, giving you a sense about the proposed projects for MCC Compact funding in Senegal's power sector. And before turning it over to my colleague, Mariam Decren, I want to give you a very brief sense about where we are in the compact development process. MCC has already been working for 2 years with the government of Senegal's Compact Development Team. This is a team that's known by the French acronym UFC. They have an outstanding website. This is a team led by Mariam Decren. And we've been working together for 2 years to identify the binding constraints to economic growth and also to develop concrete project proposals for compact funding, which you'll hear about in just a few minutes. As Jonathan Nash mentioned, this compact is going to be a single sector compact focused in the energy sector. Really designed to alleviate two binding constraints in that sector. The high cost of energy, which is among the highest in Africa, and low access rates to electricity, with nearly half the population in Senegal without an electrical connection. So these constraints and their impact on growth and development is why ambitious advancement in this sector is a top national priority for the government of Senegal. The government very recently submitted concrete proposals for investment in this sector, focusing on transmission, generation, peri-urban and rural access, and on reform in the sector. In terms of our timeline, we do hope to bring a compact to our board of directors this calendar year. This is an extremely ambitious timeline that will require us to substantially finalize the structure of the compact this summer. So there's a long approval process that we need to go through to meet the government of Senegal's timeline. And this will require us to really finalize the components, the structure of the compact in the next 5 or 6 months. So we're in a period of very intense evaluation of the proposals, vetting them through MCC's investment criteria to determine which elements will have the greatest impact and are best suited for MCC funding. We are also looking for creative partnerships that will leverage in additional funding beyond what MCC alone is able to contribute. And so I'm very happy to see here today, in addition to private firms, donors like the IFC and the World Bank and other U.S. government partners, including Power Africa and USTDA. So your feedback today will play a critical role in helping us structure this compact. And thank you in advance for the feedback that you're able to give us. And without further ado, I would like now to introduce my outstanding and esteemed colleague, Madame Mariam Decren, who is the national coordinator of the UFC Compact Development Team, which is the government of Senegal's focal point for developing this compact with MCC. Mariam.
I am sorry, there will be a little break because I'm going to speak in French. So you might have to put on your headphones, some of you. The CEO of the MCC, so to the CEO of the MCC and the director of CEO of the MCC for the Senegal, dear David, Mr. Medelkovic, the president and CEO of Initiative for Global Development, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, first, I would ask that you allow me to present in the name of the government of Senegal and the Senegalese people our condolences to the people and American of the United States and the government of the United States after the painful events of yesterday in Florida. It's simply terrible, and we're thinking of the victims and the families and the entire American people in this very painful moment. I would like to say that I am here with my team, but also I would like to salute the presence of Mr. Khan, who is the head of the economic office of the Senegalese embassy here in Washington, also the permanent secretary of the AIG, Mr. Papamonte, who is accompanying us at this very important event for the Senegalese authorities. And I would like to communicate the best greetings of the Senegalese authorities for the initiative and organization of this event that has great importance for us. For my part, I would like to salute the excellent collaboration that exists between the various teams in MCA Senegal and the MCC teams, of course, directed by David Well. And we are very happy to cooperate with him in formulating this second program, the objective of which is to remove this major constraint, as you said earlier, that has to do with the high cost of energy and the low access to electricity. So a great constraint on growth and private investment in Senegal. And I would like to thank you also particularly for having given us the opportunity to exchange and to share the project documents that were developed in an inclusive way with all of the stakeholders in Senegal. With MCC, we cooperated very well in this context. In this project, the objective is to find the financing with the MCC in the context of a second MCA Senegal program. It must be said that it's after a first compact that was considered to be satisfactory and had to do with $540 million and that was closed in 2015. It's after that that our country was considered to be eligible to submit its second program. And we hope to accomplish this process for formulating this compact at the end of this year, 2018. Also, I would like to express all the hopes that are based on this compact by the Senegalese government to definitely solve the issue of electricity in Senegal. Ladies and gentlemen, the illustrious guests, your very large presence here proves the interest that you have in accompanying our country in its quest to emerge. So I would like to dive right in and say that, as you know, the emerging Senegalese plan is the context, the reference context for our political and economic growth, and it materializes the vision of our president, His Excellency Macky Sall, and he sees that this coming to fruition in 2035. Senegal has the advantage of being the gateway to West Africa with real leadership in the region. We will come back later to the qualitative and quantitative advantages that characterize our country. I would just like to say in a few words, or talk to you in a few words about our Senegalese plan. It has to do with inclusive growth, durable growth based on three principles, with structural transformation of the economy that rests on the drivers of employment and social inclusion, with the promotion of commercial. Let me just find myself here in the notes so that I can follow along with you. So as I was saying, there are 6 key sectors that we want to focus on with employment and social inclusion drivers. We want to promote commercial agriculture and modernize family agriculture. We want to develop social housing and a construction ecosystem. There's also the gradual modernization of the social economy. In addition, there are drivers of export and foreign direct investment. So full exploitation of mining resources, positioning Senegal as a regional logistics and industrial hub, and the positioning of Dakar as a regional multi-service hub, and in a way that boosts tourism. But of course, there are preconditions that have to be in existence that have to do with a strategic energy turnaround, and that's our subject today. That's where the second MCA Senegal program is relevant. we have identified with the MCC teams that I thank once again for their commitment to this process. So we have identified the high cost of energy and a low access to electricity as a major constraint. I said this earlier. So this is completely consistent with the diagnosis made in the Senegalese plan, Emerging Senegal. So this is how the projects were identified for an overall amount of $1,336 million. This doesn't mean, I would reassure MCC, that you're going to finance this entire portfolio. We know that quite well. I think that what I would like to point out here is that what is important is that what MCC will finance or what will not finance is an opportunity for partnership with you in the private sector. And I think that's very important to know. And it was said earlier, Dr. Mima Nedeljkovic, of course, that we consider the MCC financing something that complements other resources and something that we can use as a leverage to encourage investment in Senegal. Ladies and gentlemen, the vision of the energy sector in 2035 is to allow availability of electricity at a lower cost and reach universal access respecting social and environmental standards. Here's a map of the sector in 2017. So we have an access rate of 68%, with 92% of that being urban and 40% in rural areas. As regards generation, it is done by the production units of the National Electrical Company, Senelec, 45%. Oh, sorry, 77%, 45% by the IPPs. The fuel mix is 77% of HFO and diesel, 10% is hydro, and 12% is solar. In terms of average electricity rates, and that is 20 cents per kilowatt dollar. And so we want to develop the gas subsector to make Senegal an energy hub. There's lots of opportunity there. We also want to continue the strong growth of the private sector and renewable energy in developing this sector. We also want to optimize Senegal's potential in regional integration. So to summarize, before I give the floor to Mr. Lamine Ba, who is our private sector expert, and he is also the director of the business environment for the agency to promote investment in Senegal. He'll go into the details in the project. I would just like to say that we have 4 elements in this project. The first has to do with diversification of production sources and the use of the fleet and management of demand that focuses on production source of electricity so as to reduce the cost of energy for households and businesses. The second project has to do with improving access to electricity in rural areas and in peri-urban areas, and that also focuses on improving electricity access in these areas to promote economic development. The third project has to do with modernization and expansion of transmission and distribution networks, which aim to improve the quality of the Senelec network with a view to reducing the spending of households and businesses on alternative energy. The fourth project has to do with improving the legal framework and strengthening the capacities of actors in the sector. This aims to improve the legal institutional framework to strengthen governance and competition regulation. So, with your permission, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Lamine Ba, who will give you many more details about the projects that we would like to submit for you for your evaluation. Thank you so much, Mrs. Decrame. As you were saying, we have 4 projects in this compact. The first project focuses on diversification of generation sources, the fleet optimization and demand management as well. As you will note for this project, you will see it on the slides. The projects are divided into components and activities. We are sharing the various activities with you that are part of this in terms of what this can represent for you for scope of business and investment for a partnership. And we will finish up by showing you the sectorial and overall attractions in Senegal and other opportunities that exist in the sector for procurement. What's important in this compact is to bring together three aspects: energy efficiency, production and generation increase, and access. It was said at the beginning, the objective that we want today is to reduce the cost of electricity for businesses and households. We know that this is something that is important when people want to invest in a country. Cost is important because electricity is seen as an input that has to do with operation costs of a business, and we're aware of this. And so, for us in the medium term, this compact will make it possible to consolidate and amplify the efforts made by the country. I think this was presented earlier. We've gone from 22 cents about 3 years ago to about 20 cents. Today, the activities that will be implemented that will promote energy efficiency will make it possible on the demand side to better organize things. And today we have 4,500,000 LED lamps that will be installed. For the compact, the government offered some procurement options, and these will be options for you, opportunities for you to do business. What is important, there will be also measurement and testing of these lamps. We would like to have quality lamps that comply with world standards, because it's one thing to produce lamps, but if you don't have quality lamps, it's almost the same thing as incandescent lamps. And what is important here for sustainability is the system for collecting and recycling these lamps that will be implemented. So these are all opportunities for equipment supply, co-investment. The government is also a very willing partner as regards administrative buildings, residences, hospitals. It is foreseen that we will replace 90,000 LEDs or LEDs, and we will also set up a system that will make it possible to better manage things. These will be savings in terms of power and also hours. Also, we have a situation where the country is focusing on renewable energy. So these activities will make it possible to implement and better manage everything that has to do with what is injected into the network in terms of renewable energy, but also to build a reserve. So all of the technologies, all of the means that make it possible for the government to find all of the best solutions will be studied, considered, and executed in the context of this compact. For these activities, there's very much of an interest in IPPs in terms of auxiliary services, to see how we can use those. So you can see that energy efficiency here is important, and that is something that we see devoting a big part of our budget and time. So these are things that you can think about and see how you can seize these opportunities. But in terms of optimization, in the context of the compact, the countries have just found very important gas resources with the World Bank. So we want to see how the country can better benefit from this in terms of exports. You have seen in the prior slides, we have plants that are basically using diesel, and so today we want to look at using gas and see, with all of the opportunities and technologies that exist, how we can enable Senegal to use its gas and supply a lesser cost for its electricity, or electricity at lesser cost. There is now a roadmap that we are working on so that we can position ourselves to be able to connect our electrical grid to gas. And we're also looking at pipelines. There's also the distribution system. We need to have also transportation systems and appropriate trucks. So these are things that we are open to, working with the private sector, see what are the best technologies, what's the material that we need, the equipment that we need, because the objective of the compact is to enable the government to provide quality electricity at an affordable cost. What is important at the experimental level today, we are planning that the plants that are already in operation using diesel, that these be converted to gas. So there's already 2 to 3 plants that have been identified, and where we can do studies, see how we can adjust them, retrofit them, see what the equipment is that we need, and these will be opportunities again for you to seize. For the first project, I presented all of the aspects that have to do with managing demand and optimization of generation. The second project focuses on how to improve access. And in presenting the vision of the sector, we said that there are 2 aspects that we are focusing on: how to lower the cost, but also how to increase access. You must know that in developing countries, the issues are how to have universal access. So in this project, there are 2 components. And in these components, the first component involves looking at how to connect the various development hubs. We're talking about growth rates in these countries that are true in the agricultural sector and in other sectors and in rural areas. So it's important to make it possible for rural areas to have access to affordable electricity. So we're envisioning installing 451 kilometers of lines in these areas to connect all the value chains, agriculture, fishing, tourism, and everything that has to do with services. This is the equivalent of more than 30,000 in our population that will be connected, and this will influence our access rate. The other aspect that is important is to see that there's a certain number of villages or cities that are not very far from the grid, but that we can't connect because the standard systems or the conventional systems that exist are very expensive in terms of investment. We want to envision setting up or installing a technology that makes it possible to connect these populations with acceptable prices. And today, all of the knowledge, all of the experience that you have in installing single-phase systems in North America, this would be a competitive advantage for us to enable us to connect 159 villages. Generally, these are villages that are not very populated, around 500, but that are of interest because the government wants to have equity throughout its country. It's not just a matter of connecting people in urban areas, but you also have to think about people who are in rural areas. So this is important. And generally, if you are able to experiment with these technologies in Senegal, we'll be able to increase the equipment and diversify our resources. We are aware that we are a developing country, so we won't be able to solve this problem by just installing infrastructure. So we will also need support technologies. So this is an area where the private sector can participate. So as today, we can develop everything that has to do with the grid in the country. We know today that a grid can contribute to energy efficiency, but it can also make it possible to connect isolated villages and areas in Senegal. This fund will also make it possible to work with women's groups to increase the production rate for local products. There's an expertise that is developing in terms of local business development. Today, if we're able to have electricity, there will be time, there will be, these women will benefit from this because we will be able to have a conservation time that lasts longer. These are all incremental and important aspects. We need to imagine the profitability of the user at the end of all this and all the benefits that will ensue from access to electricity. There's another important aspect with this fund to encourage the installation of innovative connection solutions. Last but not least, we have to look at the populations who don't have enough income. They don't do these transfers. So how can we transfer part of their connections? It's something important today because the experience of prior concessions enable us to say today that this is something on which part of the population, even though it might be a small part of the population, with this fund, the government will enable these populations to be connected, and then based on the flow, they will be able to participate more. They will be able to pay their bills. It's really the cost of connection that costs them and is a roadblock. So we will go to the third aspect. Production is one thing, but there's also the aspect of demand, but we also need to have networks and that connect the two. And that's the advantage of the third project. This will enable Senegal to modernize and expand its transmission and distribution network, just like all the other projects. It is again organizing components and activities. And the first component will look at the distribution network. The first activity is focused on Dakar. Some of you who have visited Dakar, you know the density that exists there. Today there are solutions that are being studied to install a loop of 225 kV, 61 kilometers, to connect and make it possible to supply electricity to the large stations. Another alternative that is being studied is to use, you can see how to use the Atlantic to have an underwater cable. That is an experiment that is being studied that would make it possible not to displace populations and preserve all the conditions that protect marine life and the marine environment. Also in the area of Dakar, what is important today is what is planned in terms of installing stations and posts or substations, and this is all included in the compact. We are looking at today, I think it was announced in the first slide, in the all the drivers, there is the very important aspect of mining. We are looking at how to connect the miners and the mining industry. The integration of mining projects is very important. This is a very promising area, and there's gold being produced and exported. It's become the fourth export resource for the country. There's a lot of discussions underway to look at the particular aspects of these areas. The mining areas are in areas where there's not a lot of transportation networks. So the idea is to put in place a network that will make it possible to connect these mining companies. but to connect the populations and the surrounding villages. This will enable us to increase the electrification rates in these areas. Also, in terms of the network, we are envisioning working on everything that has to do with improving dispatching. And today, all technologies, all processes that make it possible to give Senegal a better system is welcome. So you are from the private sector, you know your sector the best. We are open. We are looking for solutions that will make it possible to better manage meteorological data and support companies and regulators in how to better manage this issue. And I spoke about this earlier. We are interested in equipment, transformers. These are aspects that we want to focus our budget on so that we can expand. The first component focuses on the high tension distribution system. Now we're also going to look at distribution. For this component, we will need to build lines, low tension, medium tension, and to set up systems that will make it possible to better control things. In this component, it is at the CA, there were some technical and commercial loss. So how to reduce these losses, both technical and so everything that the private sector can bring to this in terms of solutions will be welcome. These are opportunities that you can seize in years to come, and this is possible in these countries and in these environments. And this will enable us to have a model that will better simulate the network.
I think that I presented the three first projects, which are, as I mentioned, these are supply of equipment, advice, technical assistance, and also looking for solutions that are the most plausible or the most optimal for the country. We know that in terms of durability, it's important to look at the institutional aspects. That is why the intelligence of this compact is to combine infrastructure and reforms. And in the long term, the reforms will change the system and have an influence and create a virtuous circle in the Senegalese electrical system. And if you see this component, this project organized in three components, as the others, the first component is to support the government to renovate the basic laws. We're working on a text from 1998 to perform electricity. The objective now is to have a code for electricity that integrates the issue of opening up to a third party, better managing the concessions in rural areas, and to have good planning and follow up in terms of investment. So these are the issues that are addressed in terms of the operationalization of the electrical code. It is up to the government to reform, but reforms have costs in terms of implementation, and that is a key of the success. The other aspect we reminded you, Senegal is a country that is going to go from that has stressed exploration, which is going to produce more electricity. So there's a shift to be done in terms of the legislation. The code of 1998 was quite attractive because it enabled us to explore and to have proven resources and to launch the exploitation. So now we have to guarantee the exploitation, give a viability and reliability and predictability for the private sector that you represent. So there's a committee that has been set up. There are terms of reference. The compact will enable us to support the government of Senegal by using the best norms, the most successful ones, and in terms of the formulation, we have a roadmap that is being prepared for the gas and all the possibilities in terms of council technical assistance to increase the private sector in terms of investment, to develop infrastructure, to develop are as many opportunities to be capitalized on. There are important reforms that are being done by the government in this area in terms of limiting exporting of these products, incandescent bulbs, and even the marketing. How can you support the government to achieve its reform and to popularize clean technologies throughout the country? This is also important. Everything that is we have to reinforce the power of the regulator. These are considered in the compact, and these activities. Today, the government has made the decision pertaining harmonization of the opening of the market progressively, how to improve things, how to reach something that is efficient, efficacious, so that the sector function better, and each entity within the sector should show the greatest profitability. I think that the last activities of this project that we discussed, it's important to have projects, but the entities today that will have to implement these activities need the wherewithal for the necessary changes. There are several investments to be made. You have to change the governance of some of these structures, so we need capacity building activities, and these has to be focused around a better mastery of the information system and a better understanding of the accounting system, integrating how today we have to respect environmental concerns, how to be in compliance in terms of social inclusion, enable women to better develop their own companies in Senegal. And I think that's what is important today when you reform. How do you manage these changes? How to anticipate the reticences? How do you build a common vision? This activity will enable us to build, and the preparatory activities with all the stakeholders, and the operational phase, we have to amplify, leverage, and better communicate. I've presented you the 4 projects, reviewing the components, the activities. I've also indicated the opportunities, the business opportunities. I think the presentations of introduction discussed what is of interest in Senegal now. We have a growth rate which is beyond 6% since the adoption of the 2014 emerging plan. Regularly over the last 5 years, we were mentioned 3 times in terms of better governance as business. This coincides with all the efforts in terms of the emerging plan. We have, in terms of the private sector, we have an 8% growth. That this is the mining sector, agriculture, tourism, and infrastructure, and we have the advantages of an integrated market. When you capitalize on Senegal, this is 80 million people. You're talking all the CFA franc countries in terms of the customs union, what we call ECOWAS, you're talking about 300 million. ECOWAS, to give you an equivalent, it's the 26th economy in the world. So this is something that is huge, that enable us, or people to come to Senegal, rather, to take advantage of the opportunities of the compact. these are opportunities for the world's 26th largest economy. And over the last few years, something important should be noted. The state has invested there. We have to reduce the gaps, the deficits. We've invested hugely in investment. Over 3 months ago, we have built a new airport. This new airport is linked by a freeway less than 10 years old. We have a port that can receive the greater tankers. We can go. So we're talking about a depth of 20 meters for the hugest boats in the world, and our infrastructure is greater and greater. We've inaugurated a conference center, and we receive the greatest conferences in the world. We also have a technical plateau in terms of health and education, which is nearing international norms. This is a space where you have all the facilities and guarantees that your children can go to quality schools. In terms of principle, in terms of promoting investments, there are a number of principles. Senegal doesn't make a distinction in terms of nationality and creating businesses. There are 4 or 5 sectors where we're recommending to associate with Senegalese, but you can go beyond 20%. 20%. This is the principle of the open market. The other aspect in terms of the employees is the residential clause. It's not nationality. It's not. The contract will be. We guarantee transfers, intellectual property. We are members of AB. We are aware that differences are done in terms of researchers. There are guarantees, and the country recognizes mediation, reconciliation, and the state has the experience of 2 cases, Mikal, where we won, and the state respects the rights when there are differences of approach and conflicts. We can guarantee when there are conflicts, we have a legal system where cases can be prosecuted. And when an investor is starting to think, oh, what will happen when I earn dividends? Rest assured, the principle is you can repatriate your dividends with a competitive tax, which is 10-15%. These are issues that people wonder about, but there are a lot of business in Senegal already, and they can guarantee this due process in terms of accounting. The international norms are integrated, are in our tax codes. You can even do your accounting electronically. I think we discussed at length of these different projects, the opportunities of the compact. Very quickly, these are slides that enable you to see beyond the compact. What are the other segments where it's possible to do business in Senegal, be it with the government or seizing the opportunities of the market? Here you already see there are different companies that are public throughout the world. And in terms of reconversion, the electrical plants, we also have IPPs. This is an opportunity to seize as well. The other aspect, you have the equivalent of 10,000 kilometers of cable. The government is considering to set this up. We have partnerships. We can discuss additional partnerships because the government we want universal access in 2025. So you're talking about massive investments. This gives you an idea on the map of the situation. When we were diagnosticating the situation. So this will be the rate of access in rural areas in green. This is the perspective. This is the future. When you in red, this is where the rate of electrification is rather weak in the hinterlands. So it's important. We are at 40% today, and the rate of access in 2025, it was going to be 2035, but all the solutions that can accelerate and the risks will be shared, and that could be studied by the government. So I thank you for your attention. I shared with you different options and opportunities in the Compact project and the different attractions that Senegal presents. Merci, David, Demi.
Has a good idea of the program that the government of Senegal has proposed to MCC. As David said, now's the time when we're getting feedback, not just from consultants that we're hiring, but from people like you who can say, that makes sense. I think this would really help me invest in this country as well. So that's what we want to hear from you after the break. And I have probably the best news of all. It's actually going to be a coffee break, not just a break. I was a little concerned because Lamine can speak quickly. And yesterday he ran through this whole thing in about 20 minutes. And if he had done that, it would have just been a break. But since he gave it for a good 45 minutes, then we now have a coffee break. So we're running actually a little bit ahead of schedule. Why don't we come back here a little bit after 11 o'clock for our feedback session? That'll give us about 20 minutes or so. All right? Thank you all. I'm going to ask them all to stay up there. Yeah. And I think, the PowerPoint, we want to keep the PowerPoint. Good, eh? Yeah, that's what we wanted.